Good morning. So today I am going to go next door and help my friend replace the fan in her Separett Tiny House compost toilet. So she's got a different one. I've got the Separett Mini. She's got the full-size one, but the fan went out a little while ago, and she's got a replacement, and I'm just gonna help her replace it. I think she's gonna do most of the work herself. It's not that hard, and she's more than capable. But I thought I would film it for you so that you could see what it's like when something does need to be maintained on your Separett toilet. I haven't replaced the one or even looked at the fan in my Separett Mini, but I imagine it's not a whole lot different. It's going to be, I think, just a little bit smaller of a casing. We're just replacing the fan. It shouldn't be that hard, like I said. Looks really straightforward, and these things usually aren't that hard. The fan is just a little small piece. It's about the size, I would guess, of your desktop computer. There's a fan in there to keep things, all the components cool. My understanding is it's about the same size. I'll let you know afterwards how it went, what the materials cost. Toasting a bagel and all of that. So I'll see you back here afterwards. In the meantime, here's some footage of her mostly and me assisting as necessary replacing the fan. All right, so we're done. That was more complicated than we expected. My friend was working under the assumption that the fan had failed. And so she ordered a new fan from Cabin Depot. And I think they're in, Sophie, don't rub against there. They're in Nova Scotia, I believe. There, are you happy now? There's only a couple of places where you can buy a Separett toilet in Canada. And Cabin Depot is one of them. I can't remember what the other one is. Anyways, so she ordered this fan, and to have it, to order it and ship it, it cost around $100 Canadian. And you could apparently get the whole blue a fan assembly for about $150, but she ordered just the fan, thinking that that it would be easy to replace. And the instructions for replacing it, like the videos that we watched, very straightforward. It didn't take. Stop rubbing against the stool. Stop it. Come on, up here. Come on, get back up here, because you're being a pain. That's why. Anyways, so the first job was to get that blue assembly, fan assembly out. You unplug it and you undo two nut screws, and it basically comes out pretty straightforward. There's a little yellow fan screen on the front. Using an Allen wrench, remove the screw, sort of a bolt that is holding it together. There's also a little nut that needs to come off for the electrical plug, so that you'll be able to pull that out, because obviously the plug is attached to the fan. So once those are out, you can basically pull it apart. There's a little label that goes across that you just have to split, and then you can pull those two halves apart, basically crack it open. But the reason that my friend asked me for help is because she has some mobility issues with her hands, and getting that sucker open was not easy. There's two little sort of overlapping clips, and you have to somehow get those off. So it took a little work. That was a little fiddly, as these projects usually are. They're always more fiddly than you expect them to be. But we managed to get that sucker open, and when we opened it up, then we were able to access the fan. Now, what we noticed was there's a lot of dust in there that gets caught, which makes sense. And now I'm thinking I should take mine apart and just clean it out. But once that's open, we now can do what needs to be done. First thing, of course, is to unplug the fan cord from the assembly and pull the fan out. And the fan is surrounded by a black piece of foam. Basically, pull the fan out of the foam, and then it's a good opportunity, like I say, to clean everything out, get all the dust out and things like that. The foam piece actually cleaned up really well. I think I need to do that for mine, because I've been using it for a couple of years. When I was in Calgary, I had a flush toilet, but as soon as I moved from Calgary, I replaced the flush toilet with the Separett Tiny that I have, and which is a waterless toilet. So once that was done, we were now ready to reassemble with the new fan. And again, it's very simple. The fan just plugs into the electrical socket, and you fit it, first you fit it into the foam with the wire going through to the back. The fan gets set in so that the label on the top is facing the opening, the circular opening, and then you plug it in. And you really need to, once you plug it in, you need to put that little nut back on the outside. Tighten the nut on the outside, so now the fan is attached. There are two little grooves, one on either side, and the foam sits in one side, and then it's a little fiddly because as you're closing it, you have to sort of guide the other side of the foam piece into the other groove, and once you've got it, then you can close it. And you can see if you've got it right because you can see through the opening. Once that's done, then you put in the bolt again, and so now that piece is back together. So when we went back into the bathroom to reassemble it, the first thing we did was plug it in, plug that cord into the toilet. and the fan did not come on. And so we're like, well, shit, what's going on here? And she's like, well, maybe the fan wasn't the problem. And so she's got a 12-volt system in her house, not a 120 volt, like a regular house. I've got a regular house panel breaker box in my tiny house here, and the house is wired just like your house is. She had hers wired for a 12-volt system because when she was building, she was projecting forward to maybe being off-grid and working on solar, and she thought that that would be a better solution. So her panel has fuses, and everything's labeled, so we're able to see which fuse was for that. It was, I think, a 10 amp fuse. I'm not sure. And she had extras, so we replaced the fuse. And that didn't get it turned on. So we're thinking, okay, it's got to be something to do with the wiring. We were able to access the wires at the back. When the fellow who put it in installed it, he basically just, there's this white clip that comes from the two sides, the side that goes into the wall and the side that goes into the toilet. It's this white little plastic ends. And we could see that those were separated. And we're thinking, well, maybe that was it. Maybe it was unplugged at the back the whole time. Nope, that didn't turn it on when we put it back. And I could tell that the cap on the piece that went over top of the other piece, sort of around, had cracked. And so they were not fitting together tightly. They were pulling apart. The ends of the two wires were not making a connection in there. And because when I pulled back those plastic caps and just touched those two wires together, the fan turned on. So ultimately, the fact is the fan was fine, and she didn't need a new fan. She just needed to fix this wiring at the back. But the new one's in there. She cleaned up the old one, and she's got it set aside, so if something happens, she's now got a spare. But so now we had to figure out how to get those two to connect. I tried wrapping electrical tape just around that cap to see if maybe it would hold, but the wires were loose inside those caps, in that they were sliding back and forth. Those two wires were not connecting. So what we did, because again, keep in mind, this is a 12-volt system, so this is not high voltage. This is not going to cause a fire or anything like that. And we were using electrical tape. So what we did was I put the caps back together and pushed those wires in enough so that they were making contact and the fan was on. And it works for now. And she's going to have an electrician come in at some point here in the future to do some things with her lighting. So at that time, he can replace that. But in the meantime, they're making a connection inside those plastic caps, and everything is wrapped securely with electrical tape. And it's now tucked behind the toilet, and it's not going to jiggle or anything like that, and it will work. It's in there, it's secure, it's working now, and she now has a spare fan for if the fan actually does go. And I got to say, we were both kind of relieved that it wasn't the fan, even though, you know, it was frustrating that we had to figure out what the problem was. Because she's been using her Separett toilet maybe 6 months longer than I've been using mine. And the thought that the fan would go this fast, this early, that soon, was a little discouraging. Because, you know, these toilets are not inexpensive. And yes, the fan runs all the time, but it's such a small little fan. It's the same size as what's in your computer, as I said earlier. And it runs 24/7, but it's super light, tiny little thing. And it really shouldn't have worn out, shouldn't have been a problem this early. So that's the good news. But I learned from this experience that maybe I should be taking mine apart at some point to see if there's dust in there and lint that needs to be sort of cleaned out. My fan plugs into a regular outlet in the house. Mine runs again as well 24/7 because what these fans do, if you're not familiar with these waterless toilets, is the liquids get separated from the solids and the toilet paper,
And the fan in there circulates air to dry everything out in that solids container and vents out of the house. It gets vented outside, and there's a cap with a screen on the back as well on it outside. And there's no smell at all. But the nice thing is, because it's drying everything out, it's even better. So ultimately, we sorted it out. Everything is figure-outable, and we were able to, when the fan did not come on, when we plugged that new fan back in, we were able to do some troubleshooting. It wasn't a fuse, and it turned out to be just that connection, those two wires that were not connecting because those caps had broken, or the one cap had broken. That's how you replace a fan on a regular Separett. I think it's a Vila model, but the full-size Separett toilet. I don't know what my fan looks like. I haven't actually had a really good look back there, but mine doesn't have that blue assembly. I do know that because my toilet is smaller, substantially smaller, but super easy to replace. The hardest part of replacing the fan was getting that casing open because of those clips, and then the rest was very straightforward, easy to do, and really the whole process wouldn't have taken more than 5 minutes if I hadn't been filming, if we hadn't had the issue with it not working when we plugged the new fan in. For those of you who are thinking of getting one of these, who have one of these, and are wondering what happens if the fan stops working, that's what you do. The fan itself can probably be ordered, sourced somewhere else, because that's pretty expensive for a tiny little fan. To buy it and get it shipped to you, $100. If you know things about electronics and computers and stuff, you probably could find a fan somewhere else. But anyways, there you go. It shouldn't have taken that long. It was kind of fun. I gotta admit, I always like trying, the figuring out piece is always fun, because ultimately it's done. And now everything's working, and she now has a spare in case something does go wrong with the fan, which is always a good thing to have. So that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, if you did, give it a thumbs up, share it with somebody you think might like it, especially if they're thinking of buying one of these or have one. And don't forget to subscribe if you're not. If you are subscribed or think you are, check, because sometimes the YouTubes does weird things and people get unsubscribed. And as always, remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind, including to yourself. I love you, and I'll see you next time.